Welcome back to Pursuing the Presence podcast. Today, I, Carly Bartell, am here with Micah Dahlsten and Mr. Dahlsten.
That would be my father.
It's good to be here. Thanks for asking.
Of course. We're excited to hear what you have to say. So today we're going to talk about an unshakable faith and what that looks like and whatever Mr. Dahlsten was led to say.
But before we jump right in, could you, what should I call you, Mr. Dahlsten, Mr. Father? Yeah. What should I call you today?
I don't really care, Mike.
Okay.
Whatever you're comfortable with, I guess.
Dad, what do you do at Heston High School? Give us a brief description of what that is.
My primary responsibility is that I teach the upper level math courses at Heston High. So I have this semester, for example, I have college algebra and calculus. And then next semester I will have no college algebra. We'll continue with the calculus and we'll add statistics and trigonometry. And then I'm also the head boys tennis coach, assistant girls tennis coach. I'm one of the sponsors for FCA. I don't know. I fill in kind of wherever they need me to fill in other areas, I guess. So
that is true. And Mr. Dahlsten's class is kind of renownedly known, I would say, for some things that he calls sniglets, I believe. Is that what it is this year?
Sniglets, yeah.
And Mr. Dahlsten, could you give us the sniglet for today?
Yeah, the sniglet for today was squin chewing, which squin chewing is that characteristic that some people have that when they go outside and like squint up looking at the sun, that it causes them to sneeze. So actually Micah has that characteristic. I think he must have inherited it because I have that one as well.
Did give a demonstration during the 5th hour.
Yes. And the sniglet for tomorrow is I think a really good one. It's stoptional. Stoptional is any stop sign that one deems optional. There are a few of those on the campus, I think. That three-way stop over by the middle school, I think, is sometimes a stoptional.
Yeah, you could probably ask a number of students, and they would say that. And a sniglet is
a word that should be in the dictionary that is not.
Yeah, so It doesn't actually exist.
Yes, it's not.
Okay.
So like yesterday's sniglet was snabble, which is to try to use a sniglet in the game of Scrabble.
Oh, that's a good one. That is a good one.
So, yeah.
Okay.
It's amazing how sometimes those come up, and you can attest to this, Mike. Sometimes at dinner something will happen, and I'll say, oh, yeah, that was the sniglet about a week ago or something.
Yeah,
so
that's pretty awesome.
Anyway.
Okay, well, thank you for that, and I guess now we'll jump in with what the Lord led you to.
Okay, so what Micah had told me when he asked me, and I didn't know if he was asking me out of desperation because some other guest had declined the invitation or not, but
no, we were always wanting to ask Mr. Dahlsten to be on the podcast.
All right. Well, I'm pleased to be here, but he gave me just unshakable faith was kind of the theme, I guess. And so in conversation with him a little bit, and then with my wife, she kind of said, well, maybe you should look at Hebrews chapter 12. And so that's where I started. And so what I'd like to do is just kind of maybe read a few verses from Hebrews chapter 12, and then perhaps that will spur some discussion amongst us. And then I woke up this morning, actually, and the Lord led me to James chapter 1 as well, so just a couple of pages ahead of the verses I'm going to read in Hebrews. So anyway, that's where we're going to go here, I guess. So I'm going to start, again, this is reading from the Message, which is if you don't know what that is, that's a great modern translation, I think, of the Bible. It puts things in a little bit more modern language and maybe a little bit easier to understand for some of us that don't like the what for and thous and all that kind of stuff. So anyway. All right, so it starts and it says, do you see what this means, all these pioneers who blazed the way, all these veterans cheering us on? And this is referring to, back in chapter 11, it's talking about kind of some of the heroes of the faith, all right? So it's referring back to them. It means we'd better get on with it. Strip down, start running, and never quit. No extra spiritual fat, no parasitic sins. Okay, this is where I feel like this next part is where it kind of feels like unshakable faith comes in. Keep your eyes on Jesus. who both began and finished the race we're in. Study how he did it, because he never lost sight of where he was headed, that exhilarating finish in and with God. He could put up with anything along the way, the cross, shame, whatever. And now he's there in the place of honor right alongside God. So when you find yourselves flagging in your faith, go over that story again, item by item, that long litany of hostility he plowed through. That will shoot adrenaline into your souls. So I think right there, I mean, what I as I read that, I'm thinking, man, if that doesn't describe pretty well what I picture unshakable faith being, I don't know what does.
And that's really good. I really like where it talks about, like, if we bring unshakable faith into this, like, how do we have unshakable faith? It's like, keep your eyes upon Jesus. Study what he did, because he's the epitome of what unshakable faith was, with everything that he knew he was going to go through before he actually went through it. He had all the reasons to quit on God, really, quit on his Father, though he never did. And so it is the story to study, to have unshakable faith. And I really like that aspect of what you just read.
Well, thank you. I also would point out, you know, we're going to go through life and we're going to have some moments of crisis. I mean, whatever those are. You've both experienced those in your life already, and certainly you're going to have more as you go through your life. I mean, there just are, and it could be, you know, all kinds of different things. It's, you know, the death of a loved one, or it's just trying to decide, for you guys, it's maybe deciding what the heck is next for me, you know, and the stress that goes with that. So, you know, I think this is a good reminder that, you know what, Jesus has our backs. And when those things come along, you know, those crises, we need to keep in mind, I think, that God allows us to have those. He is not the cause of those. And I think that's a really important distinction that sometimes gets lost. It talks a little later in here about the fact that some of those crises can be thought of as educational opportunities. And he refers to kind of how your parents would, you know, they kind of let you experience some things as you're growing up. And sometimes there's some natural consequences that come along with decisions that we make. God's going to let us experience some of those. And he gives us free will. And so because he gives us free will, we don't always make the best decisions. And he allows some of that discipline to occur. And it's not that much fun. But he talks about that a little bit later on as well. But one verse that I like a little bit later on down there, it's probably down about verse 10 or so. It says, while we were children, our parents did what seemed best to them, but God is doing what is best for us, training us to live God's holy best. So I think it's important to remember that, yeah, you're going to have some trials, you're going to have some crises in your life, but to keep your eye on Jesus, and that's the example of unshakable faith. But also understand, because a lot of people say, well, God's making me learn. Well, and he is teaching us a lesson, but he's not the cause of that. We're the cause of that because we live in a fallen world. So,
yeah, I think about, you touched on this earlier, and I think about kids. You know, sometimes experience is the best teacher for kids. They stand on a chair. Hey, don't do that. Kid, you know, maybe sits down, but it's going to stand up on the chair again. Maybe the kid falls. Now, oh, that's why I don't stand up on this chair.
Right, exactly. Yeah, or touch the oven, or, you know, whatever the case may be. That's good. Yeah, exactly. So, all right. So, and then the other thing to keep in mind from chapter 12, I think, is this idea of, you know, that we live we as believers are part of the new covenant. We're not subject to the old covenant from the Old Testament. So the Old Testament's very important. I don't want to minimize the value of the Old Testament, but the reality is that because Jesus came, lived a life, died, was buried, rose again, we are not subject to the laws. We're not subject to, well, he made everything right. That's what I'm trying to say. So he made a way for us. And so I think that's really important. And so that kind of leads me to this last point from Hebrews. And it talks about, this is towards the end, probably verses 26 maybe, one last shaking from top to bottom, stem to stern. The phrase one last shaking means a thorough house cleaning, getting rid of all the historical and religious junk so that the unshakable essentials stand clear and uncluttered. Do you see what we've got? It's an unshakable kingdom.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think it's interesting. It continues. It says, do you see how thankful we must be, not only thankful, but brimming with worship, deeply reverent before God? For God is not an indifferent bystander. He's actively cleaning house. He's actively cleaning house, torching all that needs to burn, and he won't quit until it's all cleansed. God himself is fire.
Yeah. I didn't read the rest of that, but yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. And is that, see if you can help me, saying we get to be thankful because God is doing the house cleaning, or is that saying, hey, because we're unshakable, we need to be thankful? You know what I mean? Like, do we need to be thankful to get unshakable faith, or is it like we get to be thankful because of this house cleaning that in turn allows us to have unshakable faith?
I think it's probably the latter. I think it's probably, in my mind, it's probably the latter that you said, that, we get to be thankful because our hope is in Jesus, and that's the unshakable faith that we have. But make no mistake, there will be a shaking that occurs. And so some would argue that it's starting in our world right now, that some of the things that we're going through as a nation and as a world are, things that are definitely shaken. The unimportant things are getting shaken out in a lot of instances, I guess is how I would say that.
Yeah.
The things that don't really matter in eternity. So do I have a little more time?
Yes.
Okay. Let me kind of go a couple of pages ahead into James. I love James. It's one of my favorite books of the Bible. And I don't know why I didn't think about this before this morning, but I'm thankful that God woke me up to think about it. But again, it kind of, just the first part of this talks a little bit about trials and temptations and faith under pressure and so on. But anyway, let me read it. And again, this is really good in both the NIV and also in the Message and other translations, I'm sure, as well. But I just happen to have the parallel NIV and Message version here. So anyway, I'm going to read it out of the Message, though. But it says, "Consider it a sheer gift, friends, when tests and challenges come at you from all sides. You know that pressure. Your faith life is forced into the open and shows its true colors. So don't try to get out of anything prematurely. Let it do its work so you become mature and well-developed, not deficient in any way. If you don't know what you're doing, pray to the Father. He loves to help. You'll get his help, and he won't be condescended to when you ask for it. Ask boldly, believingly, without a second thought. Don't think you're going to get anything from the master." Oh, and that's something else. Never mind. Okay, so anyway, and then a little further down, I'll just kind of go through this, and then we can talk a little bit more about it if you want. But verse 12, it says, "Anyone who meets a testing challenge head on and manages to stick it out is mightily fortunate. For such persons loyally in love with God, the reward is life and more life. Don't let anyone under pressure to give in to evil say, God is trying to trip me up. God is impervious to evil and puts evil in no one's way. The temptation to give in to evil comes from us and us only. We have no one to blame but the leering, seducing flare-up of our own lust. Lust gets pregnant and has a baby called sin, sin grows up to adulthood and becomes a real killer. So anyway, I think that also does tie into the whole unshakable faith thing. So
I wonder if I also inherited that I really like James too. So I wonder if that's another thing I inherited.
yeah, I don't know. James is a good book. I remember reading it probably for the first time, really reading it when I was in high school. And it was one of those times where there were some things just going on. And as I look back on them, I'm sure I can't even remember what they were. So I'm sure they were some little things, that seemed like big things at the time. And this was just so, it was so encouraging to me. Yeah, you're going to go through these things, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and that light is Jesus. So anyway.
I kind of want to come back to verses 2 through 4,
Okay.
where it says, "Consider it a sheer gift, friends, when tests and challenges come at you from all sides. You know that under pressure your faith life is forced into the open and shows its true colors. So don't try to get out of anything prematurely. Let it do its work so you can become mature and well-developed, not deficient in any way." And I think that's really challenging to flip your perspective on events and circumstances that you may have and think about them as an opportunity to become unshakable in your faith.
Yeah. I think that refers back to, I think that fits really well with what we read in Hebrews too, about that whole idea of, that parents and using the discipline, and that's kind of how God disciplines you in a way is, okay, I'm going to let you go through this, but I'm going to be right there with you, and I'm going to be there to support you. And, in fact, it says back in Hebrews, I didn't read this, but maybe this was a commentary that I was reading, but the point being, none of us we can't even relate to what Jesus went through for us. Mm-hmm. We talk about, I didn't get an A on my last test. That doesn't really compare to getting crucified, right? So
I think about my back injury last year and how much pain I thought I was in, and then compare that to how much pain Jesus had to be in while he was hanging on the cross. And all of it before that, nothing compared to that.
Exactly. But and that's not you were in pain.
Right.
I'm not saying that you weren't in pain. I'm just saying Jesus has been there.
Yeah.
Been there, done that, and more.
Right.
So I think that's important to keep that in mind too as we think about unshakable faith.
I just think it's so encouraging to think about how much growth there is in the hardships. I think
Right.
that's a very present theme in these verses too, is just that there is so much to be learned from going through hard things and
Right.
from keeping your eyes on Jesus through it all.
Nobody likes to do it.
Right.
It's painful. If you had your choice, you wouldn't choose to do it. You wouldn't choose to go through those things. But if you look at it, if you go through them with the right attitude and with your eyes on Jesus, you definitely can come out of those. You will come out of it
Mm-hmm.
much stronger.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Will you read that verse about keeping your eyes on Jesus? Was it in Hebrews? I think it was one of the very first things.
yeah.
Or maybe it was the end. I don't remember.
Keep your eyes on Jesus, who both began and finished this race we're in. Study how he did it, because he never lost sight of where he was headed. I think that's important. That exhilarating finish in and with God. He could put up with anything along the way, the cross, the shame, whatever. And now he's there in the place of honor, right alongside God. So when you find yourselves flagging in your faith, go over that story again, item by item, that long litany of hostility he plowed through. That will shoot adrenaline into your souls.
I think that's a great way to end this.
So too.
All right, thanks.
Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you have
a different man upon this rock. Hell don't stand a chance. Heaven's got my back. This house is built to last upon